Welcome to the Lisa Wexler Show podcast. Think of it like a magazine or a box of chocolates. You never know what you'll get. From politics to pop culture, healthcare to legal issues, it's all here. And my behind-the-wheel chats are personal observations created especially for you on podcast only. Enjoy. We have been having a deep and wide conversation about this potential overhaul to special education. Joining us now, and I thank you, Tina Courpas, for coming on the show. Tina is a freshman legislator from the 149th General Assembly District representing Greenwich and Stamford. And we got to know her a little bit on the campaign trail. She beat her opponent, who was, I believe, a one or two term legislator. And Tina has been named to be the co-chair of this special committee that is looking into dramatic changes to the special ed curriculum, some of which have really alarmed parents and administrators within special ed. So at 203-333-9422, we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into what is currently being proposed, and we'll ask Tina a little bit about what she thinks of some of these provisions. Hello and welcome to the show today. Hi, Tina.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So tell us a little bit about what's being proposed, and let's start with the why. Let's start with the why. Why?
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you for the promotion to co-chair of the committee. I'm actually the ranking member on the minority side, but so the co-chairs are two majority party folks, a senator.
Oh, really? They
yes,
don't do as co-chair, one in the majority, one in the minority?
Correct. No, the chairs are all, we have bicameral committees in Connecticut. So we have a Senate chair and a House chair, both from the majority party, and we have a ranking member, one each from each chamber of the minority party.
I see. Okay.
But thanks for the promotion. So you ask a good question. Why are we doing this? And there are a couple of overarching considerations in the special ed space. I'll hit on three of them, which will give people a lay of the land. The first is FAPE, Free and Appropriate Public Education, FAPE. And that is a constitutionally guaranteed right in this country and in this state where every child has a right to a free and appropriate public education, regardless of their level of disability. And so we have an obligation in Connecticut and everywhere to provide that. The second thing that's going on in Connecticut is that we have not fully funded special education. And the way we fund special ed in Connecticut is that each district, and we have 169 school districts, plus a few extra for every town and city in Connecticut, every town or every school district gets a set amount of money in their general education budget per student. And if they have certain other characteristics of their student body, like English language learners or an underserved community, they get extra dollars per student. And that's the baseline of how we fund general education in this state. And then if a child needs to be educated at a higher cost, like a special education student does, if that child costs over 4.5 times what the general education student costs, then the state has committed to fund the overage to each school district. And some of these special education kids do meet that standard. But unfortunately, in Connecticut, while the state has committed to fund at that higher level, we have not made good on our commitment, which frankly boggles the mind for me. You know, it would be better for school districts, for us to obviously come through on what we've committed to doing. But the problem that they've been facing is not only that the money is not there, but they never know year to year how much money the state is going to come through with. So they have to fund these children, and they expect and hope that the state will come through and reimburse them, but it happens at a 60% level some years, 70% level some years. So it's not just lack of adequate funding, it's the uncertainty thereof that hurts the school districts, because whatever the shortfall is, they've got to fund it out of their local municipal budgets. So funding is another thing we've got to fix. And third and last, I think, is really a factor going on here is the increasing costs of special education and the increasing numbers of children who are eligible for IEPs, individualized education plans, which are anyone with an IEP is considered a special education child. And so those numbers are increasing. Why are they increasing? Because in part, better identification of children, which is a positive, people have cited learning gaps due to COVID, which then become, then kind of snowball, and you start with a reading problem and you end up with several years of a reading problem that then turns into a more acute special education problem. And someone has asked me, are we picking up in the additional special education numbers, are we picking up English language learners? And the answer to that is no. That is not
that's
included.
A completely different population. That's ridiculous.
It is.
No.
And so someone asked me that, and I
it's
wanted
a good
to
question.
make sure that
Let's
clear.
just put it right down. No, that's not what we're talking about. We don't really know. I mean, frankly, and these are things that people might get angry about, but we have older people having children. We have different children. We may have more children that have more special needs. We don't know. There could be a lot of factors. We have a MAHA movement in this country that talks about environmental pollutants. We don't really know, but we know that we do have more kids that are more needy. We know, and there may be a lot of reasons for that. Yeah.
And just by order of magnitude, I know in my district, it's roughly 20% of children have an IEP.
Wow.
I was surprised by that number.
You're kidding me. 20% in the state, statewide?
Statewide, actually, let me roll that back. I need to give you that number. We have, yes, we definitely have districts in the state where 20% of the children are on an IEP, and that is the highest level of special education need, because under that, if someone has ever had a child with ADD or that needs extra time on a test,
they get a 504.
That's a different standard. Exactly. That's the one level down. We're talking only about the IEP, which is the highest level.
And the IEP, the highest level, we're chatting with Tina Courpas at 203-333-9422 if you want a comment or question. Those are kids that sometimes need to be outplaced because schools are not built to manage some of the real special needs of these kids. That's true.
Correct.
Right? Right.
Correct. Right. Yes. And if you've ever been to one of these amazing places, like an outplaced provider of special education services, you realize quite quickly that that cannot be replicated inside a public school setting completely. It just can't.
That's right. So, Tina, with that, and understanding the first thing you said, which is that kids are entitled to a free and appropriate education, full stop, but it may be costing more and the cost may be an unpredictable cost. What is it that the state is proposing to do? Because I have an awful lot of alarmed people that have contacted the show, lawyers, administrators, and parents, and they feel that whatever it is that's being proposed right now is just not the right solution. So what is being proposed?
I have to say that I agree with that. I think the bill needs a lot of work. It passed out of the Select Committee on Special Ed by a vote of 8-7. I was a no vote.
8-7?
Yep. I was a no vote, and there were several people that crossed party lines and joined in the no vote. And I think that's a function of a few things.
Who crossed party lines, Tina? Who crossed party lines? Who?
Senator Kathy Austin and Senator Derek Slapp cross party lines. Okay. And that's a function of a few things. First of all, I did give a lot of kudos to the chairs of the committee because they've worked very hard on the bill. Mm-hmm. Senator Gadkar Wilcox in the Senate and Representative Mariam Khan in the House. We have an excellent working relationship. But I do think because of the rushed nature of the process and I think we bit off more than we could chew. And I think just the process of the bill was intended to sort of put everything in there so we could hear everything in a public hearing and then start scaling back. So, some people voted yes out of committee saying we acknowledge it's a work in process, and other people, including myself, felt strongly enough that, yes, it's a work in process, but there's things in here that we really don't want, so we're a no. Anyway, the bill was voted out of committee, and now we'll hit the education committee, et cetera. And now the minority really has an opportunity to dig in, and we'll be spending the weekend doing this, giving specific comments on provisions.
And welcome back. We're chatting with State Representative Tina Courpas, who represents the 149th General Assembly District of Greenwich and part of Stamford. She joins us now to talk about special ed, 203-333-9422. And Tina is also a graduate of Princeton with a JD from Columbia Law School. Tina, we could talk about Columbia, but that would be another entire half hour on the show, I think. Don't you think? Really, I think so, probably. I'm guessing. But anyway, but we're here to talk about special ed. And this is your freshman year. You've been thrown into the deep end of this. Are you enjoying yourself, by the way?
Oh, it is the absolute privilege of a lifetime, and I've been blessed with a very interesting career, but this is the most interesting job I've ever had, and I feel just a very big responsibility to deliver for the people of the district. So,
and you're a mom yourself, right?
I'm a mother of 4 children, yes.
Yeah, I remember that. And without getting too personal about your own family situation, of which I have no idea about your own children, but I would just imagine as a mother, you have got to be in tune with the parents of kids who need special ed services, right?
Very much so. I have not had an IEP in my family, but every mother and father have had things that they feel like they need to go to the mat and advocate for their kids and solve a problem and investigate a quagmire or a difficult process. And it is it's really such a journey. And so I do have empathy for these parents because it's a lifelong journey to secure the services they need for their children. So I'm very attuned to the parents' point of view here.
So one of the criticisms of the specific bill that passed through committee on an 8-7 vote was that there seems to be a capping. And now, but just correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know what the latest iteration was. But I know that the fear was going to be that the state was going to say, well, we're going to pay, but we're only going to pay X amount. And the schools are left saying, well, how do you expect us to do what we do and pay the teachers we pay? And that's an artificial construct that you're making up that is just going to leave people in the bag. And we don't even know what to do with that. So what are we doing about that, Tina?
That is exactly as you articulated. That has been an issue in this bill. So we have private providers of special education services who receive these children, and for the most part, it sounded like to me in the public testimony, do a great job for these children, and they are very expensive. And so because of FAPE, the district has the money it has and gets some from the state, and then whatever it costs has to pay the rest. So at least 12 states in the country faced with the same issue have figured out some kind of rate-setting mechanism where they limit or state a percentage or give a number, or there's a lot of different models of how much the district is either required to pay or how much the private provider is allowed to charge. And personally, I do not like interferences with the free market because I don't think that's something government is good at. On the
They
other
never
hand,
work, Tina. They never work.
I know.
Nixon tried it in 1973 with price controls. They never work. In a capitalist world with workarounds and other kinds of things, you end up perverting whatever it is you were supposed to do. It never works.
On the other hand, that is true. On the other hand, it is not an entirely free market because the money has to come. The districts are required to pay whatever, pay because of FAPE. And if the district is not paying it, and if the parent decides to opt out of the system and have a settlement process with the district, maybe the parent will foot part of the bill. So it's not an entirely free market.
Yeah.
And so I'm obviously a parent and care very much about the parent and child perspective, but I'm also a fiduciary of the state. Like we've got to come to some path here. And what the bill proposed was it basically said that the Office of Personnel Management, SDE, would come up with some rate-setting schedule. And it proposed a short timeline initially for that to happen. And it really scared people because the last thing we want to do is drive excellent services out of Connecticut's market because people just decide, my business model can't work here. I'm going to another state. We don't want that. So that has been a big part of the disagreement over this bill. And the bill is migrating. The bill is evolving. What I would like to see, and I think we will be able to do this, is, 12 states have done this. Who's done it well? Let's avoid all of the mistakes that other states have made. Let's find the best model out there, and let's start with that for Connecticut. Let's get a lot of stakeholders' input inside. I mean, we're going to talk about it this weekend, but do we need BCG to come in and do a study on this? Like, we really need someone who can understand the business models of these private providers. And I do believe some compromise position can be arrived at, but the bill's language is not that yet. And that was one of the reasons we voted no.
And Tina
but I'm
Courpas,
hopeful.
Let me ask you something else, because I'm thinking as a lawyer, and you're a lawyer. My understanding in the initial bill, which may have been the language passed out of committee, was that parents were going to have a shifting of burden of proof when it came to the due process proceedings in arguing what the free and appropriate education for their kids were, which seemed to be grossly unfair. I saw that there was a provision that said that it was going to have to be upon the parents to show that the school wasn't giving an appropriate education. Well, you know that parents are doing that anyway. Otherwise, they're not in the room. But as a legal matter, how can the burden of proof be on anyone other than the school to show that they are, in fact, doing what they're supposed to do? Because they know what their resources are. An individual parent can't possibly meet that burden without all kinds of costly discovery, which would be ridiculous in an individual's case.
Yes. And I would say of the big three issues that we have with the bill, and that's number two. First is the rate setting. Second is the burden of proof. And yes, it was a narrowly defined circumstance in which burden of proof would shift, and that was in the case of a unilateral placement by a parent, which means that either the parent is in the due process proceeding and they have a child who's not getting services and they just pull the ripcord and say, I'm placing my child in a private school and taking a gamble that I will be reimbursed or not. It's that situation. Or for, districts like mine that border New York, I was talking to my two superintendents. It's someone that moves in from New York City for example, with an IEP, and they know their child is not going to be able to be served by the public school. And without even setting foot in the public school, they say, here's my IEP, and I would like a private placement.
Well, because they probably fought that battle in New York years ago, but I hear what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. So those are the situations. I personally oppose the burden of proof shift because for some of the reasons that you articulated, and I would say that was one of the that was a reason for a no vote by one of the folks across party lines in the committee to vote no on the bill. So that's, I would say, big issue number two. We heard from parents that the school has more of the information, that the parents are already navigating the situation, have been through an incredible process, and that they're sometimes at the mercy of delays in the process. That's one thing that bothered me. If I have a child at home who's not getting services, and if the due process drags on for 9 months, I need to have an out.
There's another school year. It's gone. And I'm the probate judge, Tina, in Westport and Weston, and I get to know some of these families after the fact because I don't meet them until the child is 18. But under the laws, the school has to provide that free and appropriate education through the age of 22, not through the age of 18. And so there are families that I have met with. And when I ask, because I do a sort of a general intake, how's the child spend his time, what kind of schooling, and then I ask the prospective guardian, what are your plans for the child's future? And we have this global discussion. That is when I become aware of all of these challenges that these families have. And these are very real cases with individual, and every child is unique. And, from 40,000 feet, if anybody thinks a parent wants to be in this situation, you've got another thing coming. They have a lot to deal with on an everyday basis. Most of these children present with tremendous behavioral challenges as well as intellectual ones. And they are getting up every single day and saying, what am I going to do today to devote myself so that my child's life is as kind and as decent and as maximizing and fulfilling as I can do. And
that's 100% right.
Right? And
yes, I will. You're absolutely right. I will say two things about that. The first is that, as you know, as a lawyer, the burden of proof shift is real. It does have an impact in the proceeding. for those who are not, down the tracks with legal processes, the burden of proof means who has the case in chief to demonstrate either that a harm has been done or a harm that has not been done. And the person without the burden of proof, they don't sit back on their heels, obviously. They have to put on a case. But the other one is the one that has to meet the standard. So it is significant. That's number one. And number two, I'd like to say, in response to my previous comments, the actual numbers, I looked them up on the commercial break, 17% of the state's children are under IEPs.
That's huge.
So
I had no idea
huge.
It was that high. No
My
idea.
district is slightly lower than that, but that is the number. But I will say the cost of special education, and this is the rub, at the current levels, they really are unsustainable. And one thing that worries me is that, by leaving districts holding the bag, they have to take money out of their general education budget sometimes to fulfill these costs. And so you really it's really a balancing act. And one thing I do like about the bill is it adds a layer to the funding mechanisms in the state, which is to give districts money, not for the outplaced, very expensive cases, but for the cases that can be handled in a district. It specifically allocates additional funds to those programs. And I think that is provided that those districts are coming through with those services, that could be helpful because it safeguards a pot of money, so to speak, for special education in district that's not coming out of the hide of the general education budget. And it is also hopefully doing a better job serving kids in district.
So Tina Courpas, you voted, you were one of the 7, but ultimately the bill passed out of committee. What now happens as a legislative process? What happens?
We are in the thick of it. We have a bill, 63 pages. We have an extensive markup of comments, riders, language we'd like to see. We're sitting down as a caucus today. We're sitting down with the chairs who've been very, very good to work with, I must say, tomorrow. And we're really going to try to make fixes. I would like to see what we do be bipartisan backed, have the backing of the executive branch. And if that means we chop off a few sections of this bill that we can't get there on, so be it. But let's do what we do well, and put ourselves on a path.
Isn't it a matter if the bill was so hastily conceived, and the reality is that the special ed community felt completely blindsided by this? We're chatting with Representative Tina Courpas. Isn't what normally happens, you say, this year is not the right year, but let's do all the work on this and come back with it next September because then we can get even more public input. Is there such a rush to do it this particular spring?
It is a priority bill for the leadership of the legislature. And you probably know, being engrossed in the legislative process, whatever bill gets the legislative number 1 is a signal to the community, to the world, to the legislature that this is a priority. And this bill has a number 1 on it. It's 5001 in the House and it's SB 1 in the Senate. So something will pass. Is there room to hive off pieces of it and make it a small, less of a heavy lift so that what we do is more measured and smaller, and we pass things we like right now and we put ourselves on a glide path for stuff, next year and the year after? Yes. But, I'm in the super minority. So we are, I think the majority wants to pass something here. And so our job, all of our job as legislators, is to make what passes as good as it can possibly be and take out things that aren't ready for, prime time yet. So that's what we're going to be doing. And we're going to be doing that, just that.
Right. And you're working on Saturday.
Oh, yes.
Well, most people think, Friday, 6:00, I'm done. And I think it's important for people to hear legislators you're not keeping a watch. You're there. You're there in Hartford as long as you need to be there, right?
Yes. I mean, it is go time, and we need to I take this responsibility very, very seriously, and the people in the legislature really do. I do have to say that. We have a lot to be proud of in our Connecticut state legislature. People really do care. We have different approaches to things, but we really want to make it the best it can be, this bill, for these kids and for the families and for the state.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Tina. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Representative
Likewise,
Tina Courpas, and I know that you're reachable via your own easily found email, and
Yes.
and I appreciate your comprehensive understanding of all of this and your commitment to what you're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me, Lisa.
Pleasure. Tina Courpas on the Lisa Wexler Show.